You've joined me here today on a lovely little 300-year-old estate lake. It's absolutely full of fish. There's loads of little rudd, which we're going to catch on the float in a bit. And there's also lots and lots of little carp, to sort of 2, 3, 4, 5 pound. And today I've got something very special to use to catch them. I've got our new range of Phase 1 rods and reel and net. Just to tell you a little bit about this kit. We've bought these rods and reels out. They are aimed at newbies, new people to angling, or perhaps those that have returned to angling. And as an Angling Trust Level 2 coach myself, this is exactly the sort of equipment I would use when I'm doing my teaching. And today I'm going to catch a few fish on these, give you a few tips, and yeah, let's put a bend in these, see what we can catch. So the first thing we've got to do is to get the Phase 1 reel onto the rod. And the Phase 1 reel, this is a 3000 size, comes loaded with 8 pound line. So we slot that into there, and tighten the winch fitting up. So that's the reel on the rod. Now I've got to thread the line through the rings. As it might seem obvious, but there's two ways to do this. You've got to open the bail arm up, release the line from the line clip. The line's now free running to thread up the rings. Now if it's a lovely calm day, that's fine. But if you've got a lot of wind, what can happen with this bail arm being open, as you can see there, the line's coiling off the spool. So I tend to close the bail arm and just release the clutch, make it nice and smooth. And that way that's going to control the line as I pull it off the reel to thread it through the rings. So I'm going to get that done now. Okay, so I've loosened the drag setting on the reel, so now I'm going to thread the line through the rings. Make sure you don't miss any rings out, because that'll affect how you cast and how the rod works. So once I got to that far, I'm just going to rest the rod on something and carry on threading the line through the rings. What you don't want to be doing is putting the rod on the floor. Rods on the floor can be trodden on. So we're going to start with using the feeder rod, and this comes with a 2-ounce glass tip. It's a carbon composite rod. Got a lovely cork handle, nice winch fitting, and the feeder I'm going to use is one of our Durman method feeders in 45 gram. So with the feeder, line goes through top, thread that all the way through. Now we've got to there, I can actually put the feeder down now. The next thing that's going to go on is our quick change bead. A little quick change bead. These packs of Durman method feeders, they come in packs of 2, and they come with 2 of these little feeder beads. So the bead's 2-part. We put on the beady top part of it. Looks like a little buffer bead. And the other part is the bit we tie the line onto. Now I'm not going to tie a complicated knot. With a lot of my coaching, especially when it's newbies, new anglers, juniors, I just get them to do one knot fishing, which is double over hand loop, which is just an over and under, and then over and under again. It's a really simple knot. Just going to moisten that a little bit. Doesn't have to be pulled tight, it's fine like that. Snip off a little bit of waste. That bead now pushes together like that. And the feeder comes down and sits on top of it. The next step is to add a little method feeder hook length. And here I'm using the 4-inch quick stop. When you look on your pack of hooks, you'll see the size, and then you'll see the breaking strain that the breaking strain of the line that the hook is tied to. Now these reels, they come loaded with 8-pound line. You want to make sure you're using a hook length lighter than your main line. Reason for that is just in case you should end up hooking a snag. At least if you do have to pull for a break, you're only ever going to lose your hook length. You're not going to be losing your feeder and loads of line. Okay, so be mindful of making sure you've got a hook length that's a breaking strain lighter than your main line. This little 2-part bead, just pull it apart. Hook onto the hook length, push the bead back over, and that hook length is now on. That's never going to come off. So we've got a method feeder, quick change bead, and a quick stop hook length. So we're now at the stage where we want to put a bait on, and what I've got is some little tutti frutti oozing boilies. I've got a tiny little bait drill, Korum bait drill. Drill a hole through the bait. And I've got my quick stop needle. Quick stop needle goes into the quick stop. Hold that nice and tight. Line the quick stop needle up with the hole you've made. Push it through the bait. Turn it sideways, that creates a little T, so that bait can't never come off now. That'll be on there for us, probably 2 or 3 fish. So that's the bait on. Now we've got to load the method feeder. With the method feeder, I place the bait in the mould. There's a little recess at the bottom for you to line up the bait with. So you place the bait in the mould. Now I've just covered it with ground bait. I'm not pushing anything down at this stage. Make sure your hook length is coming out the same end of the feeder as it goes into the mould, like so. Now we've got to there, I can hold these wings on the side of the method feeder, give it a good push down with my thumbs, turn it upside down, then we've got a little release catch. There we go. So there we've got a perfectly formed method feeder. Now method feeder fishing is just about the only type of feeder fishing I teach when I'm doing a lesson, because it is just so effective. This will catch anything. I've seen it catch 2-pound roach, big carp, bream, even seen barbel anglers fishing it. It's just so effective. The reason it's so effective is it's got a flat bottom, so when you cast it out, it's going to land like that on the bottom. No matter where you cast it, you're leaving a little pile of food with your hook bait right in the middle. Now that in itself is one of the secrets to its success, but there is a little bit more to it as well. We're going to fish it on a tight line, so we're going to put a bend in our quiver tip. We're going to tighten right up to this feeder, which is why I've gone with a 45-gram feeder. It's easy to over tighten and drag the feeder out of position, so if you've got a heavier feeder, it's easier to tighten up to it. If you was to drag that feeder out of position and move it away from where you've cast it, what you've done is you've left your lovely little pile of food 6 inches or a foot behind where your hook bait is. So the secret of it is cast it out, leave it where it lands, gradually tighten your tip up. So we're going to do that now. Whee! And that's why I make sure rod ring is behind that front rest, because that was going. Putting up a bit of a scrap. I've got the clutch or the drag set on the reel fairly light. I don't want to pull any hooks out. We're using a fairly small hook. We're using a 14. I'm letting the rod take the lunges. There we go. In she goes. Lovely jubbly. There he is, lovely little common. You might have noticed I've got a yellow bait on there. I swapped that little tutti frutti oozing wafter to a little 10mm bandam, and change of bait has got me a bite straight away. Lovely little common. Only a couple of pound, but put up a good fight, didn't he? And we use the net to return him. So I've cast out, and now I'm just burying the rod tip a foot or so under the water, and I'm watching the line just cut through the surface, so that I'm now, all the line's buried, fishing nice and tight. Now I've done this before and I felt the rod pull out of my hand, as the method's so deadly you can get a bite instantly. So I've got to there, and now I'm just going to pull some line off the spool just while I get the adjustment just how I want it. There we go. So the rod's on the rest. That ring is just this side of the front rest. Rod can't go anywhere. That last bite was a bit savage. It would have had the rod in. And while I'm waiting for these feeder bites, I'm just going to keep throwing a few maggots in for when we go on the float rod a bit later. See if there's some nice rudd about. So just to talk a little bit about the ground baits we use when we're method feeder fishing. The very nature of them, they've got to be a little bit sticky. So whenever you choose your chosen ground bait, you'll see on the packs, this one I'm using here is the latest one from Sonu, which is the Power Scopex. But on the front of it is a little picture, a couple of little pictures, and that tells you that it's suitable for a method feeder, because it's got a little method feeder picture on it. So that's what you want to look for. If you was to get a bready type ground bait, it'll be too spongy and it won't grip to the feeder. They've got to be a little bit sticky. So keep your eye open for this little method feeder sign. You can mix your feeder fishing up with the method feeder as well. You can add a few micro pellets, some little 2mm pellets, and Sonu also do a sticky pellet which you can use in the same way as a ground bait and just mould it onto the feeder. That's something you'd use in the summer when you want to introduce a little bit more bait. In the winter, the advantage of a method feeder is you can cast it out once and you can leave it out there for say 30 minutes at a time. You don't want to overfeed the fish. You're looking for one bite. So it's a one bite method, if you like. Once you get to this time of year, into the spring, the fish are starting to feed a little bit more. So I'm going to recast a little bit more regularly. I'll probably only give it 10 minutes at the most before I reload the feeder and put it back out there. So winter fishing, you're just sort of casting out once and you're leaving it. You're giving it a good half hour, 45 minutes, hoping for that one bite. As the weather warms, you can start introducing a little bit more bait and cast a bit more regularly. And as you get better with your angling and you get more proficient at casting, if you can cast it and land it on that same spot all the time, you'll start building up a little bed of bait out there as well, which again will just make the fishing even more incredible, and you'll get more regular bites. We're in. We're putting up a scrap. There he is. And he's in. Back of the net. He's a little bit bigger, isn't he? There we go. Another little mint common. Change the bait again. I took the yellow one off, put a fluoro orange on, and had the bite. I think sometimes you just got to make a change. I don't know if it's the change that has made the difference or the fact that you've just done something, recast it, put it in another spot. I don't know, but either way, a change in the bait got me another bite. There she goes. So this morning we've had a go with the 10-foot feeder rod, the Phase 1 feeder rod. I'm now going to set the 10-foot Phase 1 float rod up and see what we can catch. I'm hoping for a few rudd actually. There's quite a lot of rudd about, so see if we can catch some. And the bits we're going to be using, got a Korum ready float kit, little Preston waggler, some hooks to nylon, and a split shot. That's all I need. So first job is to get our ready float kit. The line goes through the little metal loop. I just wet the line a little bit, just makes these rubber stops slide off easier. So I'm sliding everything off the wire and onto the line. So that's that bit done. On here we've got a little snap link, and these are perfect for floats that are already weighted, which these ones are. So that's the float on. Next we need to tie a loop to which we're going to attach our hook to nylon, and again the old 1 knot fishing, so it's just going to be an overhand knot. What I do is I fold the line over, give it a twist, so I've made a nice small loop. Then it's over once and through, over twice and through. That's our little loop. Trim off the excess, keep that safe. Next, hook length. Again, with the hook lengths, these reels, the Phase 1 reels, they're loaded with 8-pound line. So you want to make sure you've got a hook length where the breaking strainer line is lighter than your main line. So we've got the size of the hook, which is an 18, perfect for the single maggot I'm going to use, and this is tied to 5-pound line. These come all coiled up. Just gently take them apart. There we go. And you attach these loop to loop. So one loop goes over the other, and then the hook goes through. And that's that. All I need to do now is just add a few split shot. So we've put our float on using the ready heli kit. I've added some split shot. I've put the bulk of the split shot just above our knot for our hook length, and I've just put one on the hook length. The reason for that is I don't want to pinch loads of shot on the hook length because it's going to weaken it, because it's quite a thin line anyway. But I do want something on there because that's going to be what I'm going to call a telltale shot. So that single shot there is going to give me my bite indication. If a fish picks the bait up and swims up in the water, my float will rise. And then if a fish swims away, obviously the float will go under. And I've added enough shot so that all I'm seeing, even though we've got an inch of colour there, I only actually want to see about that much. Therefore, it's not going to take a lot to pull it under. And again, if the fish lifts up that bottom shot and comes up in the water with the bait, the float will rise. So that's how I've shotted the float. Now, the one more thing I've got to do is to find out the depth. If you've not been to a venue before, you don't know whether you're fishing in 2 foot of water or 20. So we've got a little gadget here called a plummet, which is absolutely essential for float fishing. That lets you find out the depth. It's a really heavy weight with a bit of foam on the bottom. So we thread the hook through the top of the plummet, hook it in the bottom, and now I'm just going to swing that out. And if the float goes under, I'll need to raise it a little bit and find the depth. What I want is to get it so that I'm just seeing the very tip of the float when I've plumbed up. That way I'll know the exact depth and I can make a note of it. So another little tip regarding float fishing is whereas with the feeder we was putting the rod on the rest, we was sitting on our hands, and we was literally waiting for the tip to go round. With this sort of fishing, it's different. You need to strike your bites. So it's a case of very much keeping hold of the rod. I might use the front rest just to rest the rod on, but my hand is on the rod at all times. So I've cast out. I'm ready for a bite now, ready to strike. Just waiting for the float to go under. There it goes, and I'm on it. If the rod had been on the rest, by the time I'd went to pick the rod up to strike it, it'd all be over. The fish would have dropped the bait and we'd have missed it. So it's a different style of fishing completely. And what we're catching is these lovely little rudd. They can come back when they're a bit bigger, but they're a pretty little fish, really golden colour, lovely red fins. If you look at their mouths are facing upwards. They feed up towards the upper layers of the water. So we're actually catching these on the drop. So as the bait drops through the water, so the float is going. The other secret to catching these little fish, these little rudd, is to keep the bait going in. Just keep chucking in a few maggots all the time. Keep the feed going in, you'll keep the bites coming. Maybe it's the ex-match angler in me, but I could quite happily sit here all day catching these little fellas. Here we go. There you go, so there's a few tips on feeder fishing and float fishing using the new Phase 1 rods and reels. Go out and catch some fish.